Well, we're back again on the blog this week, and I'm happy to welcome John Walker. Hi, John.
Hi there.
Glad to have you today.
Yeah,
And
glad to be here.
I kind of met John through ACFW online. We've never met in person, so it's good to meet this way via Zoom. Second best, I guess, to meeting in person. But I'm going to kick this off with letting John just introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his family. So go ahead, John, let us know about
Yeah.
you.
Well, my name is John Matthew Walker, and I've been married to my wife Amy for 34 years. We've raised,
Congratulations.
we raised three children, and our youngest is 26. We have one grandson. I'm a family physician here in Central Indiana, and we grew up together. My wife and I met when I was in first grade, and
Wow.
yeah, we started dating. I liked her in high school, but I don't think her mom was ready for her to have a serious relationship yet. And we started dating right after high school, and so it's kind of nice to grow up with her. We don't have any questions about each other, and been together for 34 years. Well, longer than that if you count,
Yeah.
dating and engagement. So
Right. Yeah. My husband and I were high school sweethearts. We met in the
yeah,
eighth grade. And
yeah,
yep. So I know all about that. So
yeah.
tell us a little bit about your writing. How did you get started?
Well, it's funny. I got my start. I was sitting next to my mom at a praise gathering in Indianapolis, and that was like a 3-day concert that Gaithers used to do years ago. And
Mhm.
I don't even remember what the topic was or what they were talking about, but I got to thinking about a family history that we have. My mom's ancestry were Huguenots. That's basically French Protestants, and they
Okay.
left France because of persecution, went to Ireland, and ultimately to the States. And um, one of the things that's a little bit of a mystery in the story is they took slaves with them to Ohio, and those slaves were set free, and they took the last name Let, and they're actually buried in the same cemetery, the two families side by side.
Hmm.
That inspired my first story, which was a historical fiction. And I named that one Tiny Blush of Sunlight.
Hmm.
That was where the real inspiration came from. And my kids were little. I wrote that thing over a period of years. Didn't have any clue what I was doing with the writing, so it was all over the place. But I actually rewrote that book last year and re-released it. So, um, but that's how I got my start.
So how many published novels do you have at this point?
I have three that are published right now, and my latest is Moonlight Awakens, which is a sex trafficking story.
Mm.
And Fire in the Moonlight came out in the middle, and that is a story of persecution in India.
Mm.
So both of those are more of a suspense.
Okay, so you write historical and suspense.
Right.
Okay, so what got you interested in suspense novels?
I think that the real reason for writing suspense, that's the kind of stuff that I like to read. The storyline keeps it moving, keeps me engaged.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I went into medicine is I was intrigued watching my dad, who was a doctor, figure things out. He had a guy come in one time. I was working with him as a scribe. He had sort of come down from the ER to do urgent care the last 13 years of his career. And this fella came in complaining of indigestion. And my dad steps in the room, takes a look at this guy, and says, I need an EKG. And anyway, winds up sending the fella to the emergency room. The guy has a heart attack that night in the ER. And I remember thinking, how did he know
Mhm.
that? How did he figure that out? And so I've just always been intrigued by figuring stuff out.
Right.
And And I think that's part of what makes for good suspense is you
Mhm.
want to write a story that creates intrigue and that the reader wants to figure out, oh my goodness, what's going to happen
Right.
next.
Yeah.
So,
I really enjoy reading suspense as well. And, Christian suspense can be a challenge
uh-huh.
because, you've got murder and some dark themes in some suspense stories. So, how do you handle that as a Christian writing murder and mayhem?
It is difficult, and it's honestly been a bit of a stumbling block for me because I've put my story in front of a few acquisition editors who really liked the writing, had excellent feedback, but um, it was too dark for their
Mm.
audience, and that's what I was told. And ultimately, that's why I went ahead and self-published Moonlight Awakens. Um, a story about sex trafficking, it's hard to make that G-rated.
Mhm.
Um, and honestly, it's even hard to make it PG. So I would describe it more as a PG-13. And, you know, I don't want to soften it down. I don't want to water it down too much, but you can tell the story without being too graphic and without using harsh language and that kind of stuff. But it is a real balance of keeping the story authentic and palpable, so
Right.
that the reader can really feel it and trust it, because there's a lot of stuff that's overly softened out
Mhm.
there that it just becomes trite and people don't really want to read it.
Yeah, I know. I've had people say they don't really enjoy Christian fiction because all the
Oh,
characters are so predictable and squeaky clean, and that's not
yeah,
real life. People
yeah,
just don't live like that.
yeah.
So,
I think it's kind of sad for some of the Christian fiction publishing houses because I think part of why they're dwindling is they're not taking any risks.
mm,
They've kind of retreated into the people who um, they already have published, and you and I talked about platform. Part of the reason why that's so important is because they don't want to take a risk.
mhm,
Well, if somebody's already got a huge platform, well, they're not taking a risk. But sometimes you just need to grab a hold of a good story, a great story, and
mhm.
say, you know what? I don't think this one's a risk because it's just so well written and it really tells a story. And yeah, it might be a little too dark for some of the folks that we've been appealing to, but maybe we need to stretch ourselves. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm not really worried at all about that at this point. My book's doing pretty well, and I think if a publisher came along and said, "Hey, we'd like to take your Moonlight Awakens," I wouldn't see a reason why I'd want to do that at this point.
Well, it's to a point now in the publishing world, traditional publishing is great and there's a lot of benefits to it, but also indie publishing is very well respected now.
Yeah,
It
well,
didn't
and I
used to
still own
be
my
years
story.
ago.
I
Right,
still
right.
own my story. I can do with it what I
Hmm.
want.
Hmm.
So
So tell me a little bit about how you incorporate Christ and hope into your stories.
sure, sure. Yeah, my tagline is suspense that awakens hope. And that's what I
Mm.
really like to do because one of the things that I like to demonstrate, and I think this came to me when I was a little kid, my mom used to drag me around to all kinds of stuff that would just bore a normal child to pieces. But I just tried to learn how to enjoy everything. Well, I was probably, I don't know, 9, 10 years old, and we went to hear Corey Ten Boom.
Mm.
And
Oh goodness,
for
that had to
those who
be.
Right. For those who aren't familiar with her, I mean, she was a watchmaker, the daughter of a watchmaker in Holland, and her family hid Jews during World War II, and they ultimately were arrested. And her father and her sister both died in concentration camps, and she was released. And so here she is telling the story. And I remember her saying at this thing, and she's famous for this quote, is there is no pit so deep that God is not deeper still.
Mhm.
And that's what I do with my writing. I take you deep into that dark, nasty pit and let you see that the light is still there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal of my writing, because even in the deepest darkness, the light is present.
Yes,
Um,
amen.
yeah.
Amen. So are any of your stories inspired or based on true events in your life or the life of other people you know?
Yeah, I think you can't hardly write without pulling stuff in from your own life and your life experience. Now, Moonlight Awakens, it's not a true story, but there are lots of fragments from true stories in there, because, to do that story justice, I felt like I had to dive into that world in terms of my research, and just talking with different people who've touched that industry or come out of that industry, and reading biographies and news articles and all kinds of things to give the story life and authenticity. And so it feels very real. And I've created a character. Emma is my main character. And I've had people tell me that they just feel like they know her.
Mm-hmm.
My secondary character is a guy named Michael, and I've had people say, "Oh, I just feel like I know Michael and Emma," because when they read the story, it takes them into it. So even though they're not true stories, there's a lot of truth
Yeah.
in them, and that's kind of my goal when I'm writing. I want it to feel very real and authentic.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned research. How much time do you normally spend on research? And do you research before you start writing the book, or is it as you go along and you come across something, you say, oh, I need to research that?
It's a little bit of both, and yeah, my problem there is I'm really good at chasing down rabbit holes.
Yeah.
I'll get hung up on something, and I have to tell myself, okay, you can research this later. And so when I'm writing through like a rough draft, and I don't do a rough draft of the whole book, I'll do a rough draft of a chapter at a time, basically. And then I hone the chapter. So I write a chapter, rewrite the chapter, kind of thing. So I'll write it out first, and then I'll go and explore with some research. But I do some foundational stuff just to make sure I'm not like way off track at the beginning. But then the research grows as the story grows.
Hmm. How many years have you been writing now?
Well, I think I started in 2004
Okay.
with Tiny Blush of Sunlight, and then that book just sat there. Okay, I think I released it in 2007. I did nothing with that, and that was when self-publishing was still in the embryonic stage, and I think that was a mistake. At that point, it was frowned on like the devil or something, and rightly so. So I had to get the rights back to that book from the self-publishing company, and then rewrite it. So, but realistically, in terms of how long have I had this career going, I would say more like 3 years, because that was that was when I went back to ACFW. I got an agent, and we sent the uh, one of my books to multiple, well, two of my books to multiple acquisition editors. Everybody, really gave good feedback on it, but it didn't fit the market, different reasons. So
Right.
um, anyway,
So you mentioned that you're a physician, a family physician.
right,
That's your full-time day job.
that is my
So
full-time
how
day
much
job.
time do you actually get to spend on your writing?
Yeah, that depends, because I have to be fair to my wife, because well, she told me once that I could, write every night if I wanted to. And when I'm in the thick of it, I mean, I basically will do that, but I don't do that all the time. It's just not fair. Um, but for example, with Moonlight Awakens, we took a trip to Gatlinburg, and stayed in the cabin in the mountains. And I would write for about 8 hours or something a day, and I was cranking out a lot of stuff. And then we would go out to dinner, and we'd spend a half a day driving up into the Smokies or whatever. And then when we came home from that, I would write pretty much every night for a couple of months. And then doing the rewrite, and then I send it to my editor, and then I'm going over her notes and so
Right.
forth. So it's concentrated, but I would just say it's more like spurts. Like right now, my writing is a little bit abysmal because I've been so busy with a lot of other things, and not wanting to take time away from us. Um, so it's more like once every 2 weeks I'll sit down at this
Mm.
point and write. Um, and also it depends on what I'm writing. If
Mhm.
I'm writing and I'm really feeling it, I'll just crank on it. So, and
Mhm.
I'm very, I guess you could say I'm a binge writer.
Yeah.
Um,
So is your most recent book Moonlight Awakens? Is that the
that's
latest?
that's the most recent one.
Uh,
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
tell us a little bit about that one. About
Sneak it in here. There we
yeah.
go.
All right. So tell us a little bit about the characters and what the theme is for that book, and what you want readers to take away from it.
Right. Yeah. Well, my main character, her name is Emma, and she comes from a very difficult situation, and essentially runs away to get out of that. And through that, she falls into a seductive trap, if you will, and gets pulled into a life of being trafficked. And the whole rest of the story is her, first of all, fighting to figure out how to survive. How do I keep living like this? Do I want to keep living? Is there any chance of getting out of here? And then her story collides eventually with my secondary character, Michael. Um, and he's sort of the conscience of the story, if you will, because he's wrestling with the whole thing of sex trafficking because he recognizes that that's what's going on. Doesn't hit him right away, but he figures out what's going on. And then it's like, okay, am I going to ignore this and walk away? Am I just a bystander? Am I supposed to do something? And so, to me, as a man reading the story, um, I would see him as my conscience, trying to help me figure out what do I need to do to be part of the solution. And I know that some of my readers have done that too, because in some of my reviews, I love this. They'll say, I'm so compelled by this story that I have to get involved,
Hmm.
or I have to contribute to one of these organizations that helps rescue people from the sex industry. Um, and that's a beautiful thing to me when the reader can relate to it in such a way that they're inspired to follow that conscience,
Yeah,
just like
absolutely.
my character does. So
Mm.
I didn't
So
want to give away too many spoilers.
no, no. So what is your hope for readers as they read this book? What do you want them to take away from it?
Yeah, the takeaway is that a couple things. One, this is a real problem, and it's in your backyard. It's in your
Mhm.
neighborhood,
Oh
even
yeah. Yeah.
very possibly. I think people think of sex trafficking, they think of, little girls from Thailand or India or
Mm.
something like that. And that's changing. People are
Mhm.
becoming aware that, I mean, the last time I looked at the statistics, there's like 16,000 people each year that are trafficked in the United States. We're
Wow.
not talking about kids coming over in container ships or something like
Right.
that. We're talking about some of your kids'
Mm.
high school classmates or something like that. And it's not always what you think. It's not always somebody being abducted or such. Even it might be their uncle that's selling them, or even a parent.
Yep.
And so I want people to recognize that the problem is deep, and it's broad, and it's real. Um, I don't like to write with an agenda. Okay. So I'm not saying that I wrote this with that kind of agenda, but having written it, that's what I see. That's what
Mhm.
I want people to come away with, because I didn't write it to necessarily do all that. I wrote it to tell a good story and to
Mhm.
hopefully touch their heart. But I think the Spirit has a way of doing that
Mhm.
through you. You know, one of the
Yeah.
questions that you ask in the stuff you gave me ahead of time is, you know, how do you see Christ in your writing? And you know, my answer to that is I don't really try to overtly, you know, pump some gospel into my story, or, you know, have the character get saved at the end, or something like that. Not that that's bad, um, but I just feel like it should be an outgrowth. You know,
Mhm.
Jesus told the disciples and the Pharisees, you know, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so what's in your heart should come out in your writing. And so, you know, when I'm writing this story, I get to a place where my main character has kind of a come to Jesus moment. And I didn't really want to write that, you know. Because I just, it felt like, okay, I don't want this to be, you know, trite or contrived or
Mhm.
forced.
Preachy.
Yeah, yeah. But it wasn't. It just came out, and so I'm like, okay, I have to write this. So I'm writing it, and then of course I'm reading it to see, you know, does this fit in the story? Is this, am I drizzling cheese all over the story? Did I just ruin it and make it too, you know, fantastical or unbelievable or something? And it's no.
Mhm.
This is a real uh, gut felt moment for my
Mhm.
character. Um, and that to me is how Christ needs to come out in your writing,
Right.
because otherwise you just don't want it to be contrived or made
Right.
up or
Yeah.
anything like that. Okay.
Yeah. That's true. Well, your stories sound wonderful to me. I love real life, gritty type stories
Yeah.
where you do show hope that, even in, like you said, the darkest places, Christ is there and there's hope,
Yeah.
and we can see that. So they sound great to me. And I've really appreciated this time together to get to know you a little bit, get to know about your writing and your books. Tell me and tell those who are watching, what can we do to support you?
Oh, well, I mean, the obvious answer is, you know, you can go out and buy
Buy
a
your
book.
books.
So, you know, you could follow me on Facebook. My website is very easy. It's just my name.com, johnmatthewwalker.com. And I also do a podcast with a friend. It's jackandjohnpodcast.com. He's a retired pastor. Um, but yeah, you know, look me up on Facebook. You can send me an email, connect@johnmatthewwalker.com. There's so many ways, but the main way would be buying one of these
Right.
on Amazon, and then hitting me with a review.
That's right.
Uh, one of my favorite kind of reviews, I've got several where folks have said that the traditional, you know, I just couldn't put it down. And I think that's what every author wants to hear.
Right.
Um, or, you know, I read this in one day or something like
Hmm.
that. I couldn't get
Right.
anything else done, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Music to your ears. Right.
right, exactly.
Well, again, I appreciate your time, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you and hear about your writing. And I really wish you the best and God's blessing on your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll be following you as well.
All right. Thank you.
Um,
Take care now.
yeah, thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.